in any event, he runs through the same thing. He does the same thing over again. Now, you would think a guy that had God speak to him, hey, he's in tune with God, all these things are leading, he's got all these things going for him where he directly talks to God. I mean, when it says God speaks to Abraham, it's all, I don't know whether it's an audible voice, but it doesn't give any impression that it isn't. Some of them were dreams, but there's a lot of direct speaking of God to Abraham. Now, again, the other strange thing about this is Sarah, and she's in her 80s, if not 90, and she's still attractive. Wow. Okay? So we're talking, this is a woman that these guys are willing to kill the husband and say, if that was their custom, which it wasn't, it was Abraham's impression and his perception of things, but they're still willing to take this 90-year-old woman into his harem. And I'm thinking, wow, she had, and it says Sarah was a good-looking woman in the Bible there, but when you get up to 90, some of that stuff seems that it should be wearing off, but obviously not in her case. All right? So these are kind of neat things that you just start mining the verses here and say, this is a different circumstance. Now, okay, the last thing we'll talk about here, next two last things is Sodom and Gomorrah, the story there, and Abraham, he's bargaining with God. Now, God is sovereign because in some instances of the Bible, you see people questioning God, and God does sort of a zap and says, don't question me. Like in the case of, I don't know if you remember John the Baptist, when his birth was announced, his father, and I'm trying to think of his father's name, maybe Zechariah, but in any event, he's in the temple, and they used to have one priest go into the temple and do the rituals that they needed to do, and so he goes in there. The messenger, the angel appears to him and says, you're going to have a child. And at that time, his wife Elizabeth was also barren. So he's in this mode of not thinking that he could have a child. And they're older. Okay, they're older again. So he's in a kind of similar situation. So he questions him. He says, well, how can this happen? The angel goes, zap, since you didn't believe me, you're mute. You're going to be dumb, I guess would be the proper word. He couldn't talk until John the Baptist was born. Okay? So God said, bam, you're not believing me? In this instance, Abraham, he goes back and he says, Lord, if there's 50 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, would you spare the town? God says, yeah, if there's 50, I'll do it. Then he just goes down the line. He keeps negotiating. He goes all the way down to 10. Okay? And so there's numerous times God doesn't reprimand him. And so why is that? Maybe it's the tone. Maybe it's the attitude. So we need to be thinking of those terms. When we're talking to God and going back and forth, He's merciful and He will listen and He will hear us. Okay, but I guess it has to be the right attitude. Now John the Baptist's dad maybe didn't have the right attitude. Maybe it was one of disbelief. Abraham had the right attitude. All right. And then the last one, the ultimate thing of Abraham was when he goes through all these years. He's 100 years old and his wife's 90. He finally has this son. God says, take him and sacrifice him. Wow. Now, if you read the account of Scripture, it does not say Abraham went, oh, woe is me, how can I do this, God? Now, it probably went through his head, but the impression you get in the scriptural verse, and you're trying to think here, now Moses, did you get this account right? Did you get the story right? Was there something in the writings that you didn't get? Was there somebody that told you orally the story as it got passed down? Was there something that told you not to indicate any turmoil in this man's life over sacrificing his son? It just goes, you read the account and it goes, boom, Abraham, he heard it. He says, okay, come on, Isaac, we're going out for a walk. Now, note again, he did not tell Sarah what he was going to do. He says, my son and I were just going out, and we're going on a, whether he called him a backpacking trip, we're going to go do some hunting, we're going to go make a sacrifice, do whatever. So he doesn't tell her any of this. He just gets his servants. He doesn't tell his servants. He doesn't tell Isaac. But who do you tell in that instance? And then you better be darn sure that was God, right? It wasn't some mushroom that you ate or whatever, and you're getting, hallucinations over this thing, because this is pretty radical. God promised this thing, but you know what Abraham had in his head? He had in his mind, even when he was going up there for that sacrifice, he says, well, I'm going to do this sacrifice, but somehow, some way, God's going to raise him from the dead, because he promised me that he's my descendant. So he will raise him from the dead. So that's how Abraham reasoned this out. So there's the then and there. This is where Abraham, this is the scenario that he's in. All these impossibilities turned into possibilities. There's an earthly perspective and there's a spiritual perspective to this. Our battle and our struggle for a lot of these things is very similar. We have to get into that spiritual realm at the right times and the right moments and be listening in order to obey God and do, as Abraham did, some radical things that just did not make any sense from a worldly perspective. But they made all the sense in the world to God because he was obedient to God, and that's why he's the father of the nation of Israel. So that's our wrap up for that, and we're going to now view the video of Seth.